Hello, I'm Kate McKay, and welcome to Survive to Thrive. Today, I will be interviewing David Greenfield, and David is someone that I've known. I can't wait to share some stories, but I'm going to read his bio. He has served as the Director of Sales at General Refining Corporation based out of Hempstead, New York, since 1999. GRC is a leading refining of precious metals across the U.S. and Canada. He attended Tulane University in New Orleans, LA, and holds a BA in Communications. He is based out of New York City and resides with his wife and son. Welcome, David Greenfield.
Good day, Katie.
Yay.
How are you? Hi, everybody.
Yes, I'm so glad to have you. So I called David today, just a little bit of a backstory, but some people don't know this, but I had built in 2008 through 2010 a gold company that I just basically ran out of my house with a mom of 3 young kids. And as I recommend to all entrepreneurs, we all should have a board of directors. And David just happened to be what I consider to be my business coach and consultant as I built the company while processing all my gold through GRC. So that's a little bit of backstory. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Katie has been a longtime friend and client, and certainly she really was at the forefront of the gold buying craze back in 2009, 2010, into 2011, and she brought in millions of dollars of business to our company, pretty much servicing the New England area, and she was quite successful at doing it. And then as the gold buying craze dissipated and went away, she entered other marketplaces, but it's good to see you again, Katie.
It's so good to see you. So I could have always talked to you for hours, and I actually oftentimes did call you and say, what's your take? What should I do? So I think that that's obviously the key to your success, and that I trusted you, Dave. In a business where there is such a lack of trust, particularly for women as an entrepreneur, and never taking a business class ever, I really valued the trust and trusted you very, very much. So you can't make this up. And I think that part of it is that, we got to trust our gut and intuition on the people that we trust as we build our business. So just thanks a lot for that. So what up? So talk to me about, we have so many things we want to talk about, but let's focus, as you recommended, talking about the U.S. economy and why we're in such a mess today. And again, right now we're recording this on April 6th. We're in the midst of a pandemic, and I call this viral economics, right?
Yes.
So talk to me about your insight, and not only just obviously commodities, but how do we get to be in this mess, Dave?
Well, this is a long time coming. This didn't happen overnight, and certainly the COVID-19 didn't necessarily trigger the unraveling of the Americans plus the world economy. For about 50 years, we've kind of entered a global pattern where we would focus mostly on domestic numbers. And as soon as we opened up our doors to other nations around the globe, be it Europe, be it China, be it Japan, other marketplaces, we've relied on other nations to support us for products such as pharmaceuticals and certainly housewares and automobiles, and we're so reliant on it at this point. We've changed our methodology. No longer do we value the American business place. I'm not trying to echo the sentiments of President Trump, but we really did lose our way. So when a global pandemic strikes, we're so reliant on other parts of the world for ventilators, for masks, for pharmaceuticals, and they're being consumed and used by their own nations. We're quite a bind as we try to fight this horrible virus. It's led to a lot of problems there. But more so, I'm not focused on the science of the COVID-19. I try to look at what's going to happen afterwards, what's going to happen after this settles down, because we don't quite know when it's going to settle down. We hear things, well, as the summer comes, it might go away. But it's going to come back again, most likely, without a cure and certainly without a vaccine. So certainly for the unforeseeable time, we don't know exactly when this is going to end. And could we be locked down again? We're right in the midst of the lockdown pretty much as a nation right now. where businesses are certainly going to get crushed. There's not going to be an aftermath for them. It's going to be a bloodbath. And we are in a very, very tough period of time where we don't know. We're just trying to survive physically. But afterwards,
I just have to interject for one moment.
Sure.
I mean, this is coming from you, Dave, and you and I are pretty positive people. I mean, we are, we built our lives on relationships and on doing the best for our families and our country and for our, friends and such. So this isn't a conversation that we're having that's based on doom and gloom. This is like real world stuff.
This is absolutely, we've heard about what a Great Depression was like in the 1930s. We know that FDR had to get us out of this Great Depression in the United States, and it was a global depression. But from an American perspective, we've heard about breadlines. We've heard about these horror shows that were synonymous. And when we were in school, we learned about the Brother, Can You Spare a Dime? All these things that were never really commonplace, in our lives the last 100 years for the most part. Now we're facing it right up close. We've got a front row seat to it all. So the reality is this is the 1930s about to start. And the question is, who gets a parachute, who doesn't? Because nobody wants to live in this world, but this is the world we've embarked on. For a variety of economic reasons, we're in that boat today. I could share some of those reasons with you. For the last 40 years, we were 50 years ago, the United States Congress was very concerned with the idea of deficit spending. They always wanted to operate in a surplus or a near surplus. We were a very thriving economy in the 1950s and 60s, and even into the 1970s. Then, as we've embarked on a pursuit of oil, we've looked to other nations to invest in America, and we've invested in them. As a result, our deficits grew greater. Politicians cared less about deficit spending as opposed to just taking care of their constituency, which was just a political expedient thing to do. As a result of that, we put ourselves in a horrible situation where we don't care about the deficit anymore. We can go out and print more money anytime we want. We can go out and print more money, and the deficit grows and grows and grows. But as I was talking to you earlier, Katie, the biggest fear about all of this is the virus of inflation, which is on our way.
Right.
And that is the thing that I caution against, or not just caution against. I mean, we've seen examples back in 2010 when the United States government bailed out the banks. When they bailed out the banks, they kind of set the pattern in motion for what's going on today, where we bailed out every small business. Everybody gets a check for $1,200. Yet nobody in the United States, 25% of the United States has a savings account of less than $400 in the bank. How is $1,200 to benefit people truly? So I felt back in 2009 and 10 that they should have let the banks collapse. It would have been a chaotic situation back then, but Obama, no president wants to deal with what that apocalypse is going to be, and nor does Trump on this situation.
Right. That's fascinating. So what are you seeing, like, just looking, let's just say, talk to me a little bit about gold.
Sure.
Because obviously I was fascinated when I first got into the gold business, because it was such a direct relationship to the global economy, not just what was going on in the US. So I became much more keyed in and interest to global economics and global and socio-political issues far more through my gold business.
Absolutely. Gold has been around for thousands upon thousands of years. It's been the most tangible asset one could hold, more than even real estate, that was portable, and it was adorned by kings and peasants, and it was the aspirational method of economy. You could always count on gold in tough times to bail you out of certain situations. We're in a situation right now, obviously. Gold has really in the last week or so exploded from where it was around $1,580 to now it's just about $1,660. I believe gold runs past 2,000. I think it runs close to 3,000. And I think that it is the absolute greatest investment you can make today. We got so excited about the stock market over the last 30 or 40 years. I was a stockbroker for about 5 months back in 1995. So I have experience in this area, knowing that there was just, as Alan Greenspan talked about, there was a rational exuberance within the world of the equity markets. And as a result of that, people went haywire. They just threw everything they can into stocks and equities, where that's just paper money. That's all that is. That's really all it is. You're not investing in a company. You're just focused on whether or not your returns are going to help your pension out, or you're going to help your 401k. But in reality, you are holding paper. Gold, on the other hand, in a crisis which we're at right now, and we don't know how long this persists, is the one area of investment that governments look towards in situations like this.
So why did we go off the gold standard? And what do you think the implications of that is going to be? I'm just curious about that, because I don't think we ever talked about that.
Terrific question, and very few people even want to talk about that. In 1971, Richard Nixon took America off the gold standard. I think it had to do with his political fortunes. He recognized that the American currency market, he had the ability to print money. We have the ability to basically finance ourselves at any point in time. And with that, knowing that, gold takes time to mine. It takes time to bring to the marketplace. It's a dead investment in many people's minds, and that's certainly how Wall Street looked at it. It just sits in a bank and it doesn't do anything, except in a situation like today, where it has a tangible, real value. Why did we go off the gold standard? I don't quite know the full answer. I think that it would be a sensible thing if we actually return to that. What it meant was, for every dollar of money that was printed, there was a dollar of gold to back it up in the Federal Bank Reserve, okay? And since that point in 1971, we run up trillions upon trillions of dollars of deficit. And we're past the point of no return. So when I talk about things like the Great Depression, even with optimism, and I certainly want to be optimistic, but money can bail us out to a point. And that leads me to the next tragic part of this. The one thing that's worse than the virus in many ways is the aftermath, and what's going to ensue is massive inflation. Many of you out there, are people who are watching this, may have a job, may even be able to keep their job, but don't count on raises. But you count on milk going up from, let's say, $3 a gallon to $6 a gallon, or gas from $2 a gallon to $6 a gallon. That's going to be very painful. It's going to be a horrible situation where your dollar doesn't go very far, and we only have our politicians to blame for that. That's really what we're talking about.
Right. And so what would you recommend for people right now who are in the situation, this worst case scenario situation, that, you know, literally the statistics is that people, and we're not talking about $400 in the bank. We're not talking about like blue collar people. We're talking about middle class and upper middle class people with $700 average car payment.
Absolutely.
What's that $1,200 going to do when it's 1 month of car payment?
Exactly. It's a brutal situation. I would say that if you do have any investment, if anybody's looking to invest, I would say invest in gold. And the way to do that is through an ETF, exchange traded fund, and GLD, which is short for gold, is something that I would highly recommend at this point. Put yourself in gold, even if you can't get your hands on physical gold, which is in short supply right now. Definitely lead yourself towards going into some sort of investment regarding gold. As far as the day-to-day affairs, I think we're going to see a lot of our economy change. You have to be creative, like you, Katie. Certainly, you have to be entrepreneurial at this point. You can't just wait for an ideal job to come along. I feel very sorry for anybody graduating college or even in college right now, because you've invested time and money to get an education. This may be a very brutal job market going forward. And I'm not talking about for a season or a year. I'm talking for the foreseeable future. So I think, obviously, look backwards. Go backwards to 1929 and 30 and read the newspapers then. If you can, go back in time to see exactly who succeeded, who failed back in 100 years, because that's really all we have to go off as our history.
Right. And yeah, really taking that context and applying it forward. And again, you know, you're right now, viewers, you're on the, you know, you're watching two people who are
Mhm.
very, in general, positive, affirming people. And so
Yes,
this is like, this is
yes,
serious. And I know clearly everyone knows it's serious. And
yeah,
we also understand that the terrible toll that the virus is taking
mm,
on people. And then
sure.
the implications of the economic piece. So, you know, I'm hoping that people have the grittiness, because I think that's ultimately what
Mhm.
America is built on. And
Sure.
that is what we're going to have to tap into right now, is being gritty in how you're going to survive. And that requires really doing a lot of inward searching,
A
figuring out
hundred
what
percent.
is important to you, and then bringing the relationships around you, growing relationships. Because right
Mhm.
now you have trust, and you have your relationships, and you
Mhm.
have your health.
Well, that's the thing. You know, you don't want to jeopardize your health, but you do have to take certain risks out there. You
Mhm.
can't go right now to you know, the job hunting is not on yet. People are sheltered, they're cloistered in their homes, and they have to figure out a way to survive to the next day, whether it's providing, you know, getting meals on the table. But I heard something interesting from, I'm from New York, and I'm not in New York right now, but I have read from, I read the New York Post quite often, and there was a great article about I guess it's some sort of taxi service out in Long Island. And what they were trying to do, there's a lot of people from Manhattan who escaped Manhattan. They went out to the Hamptons, they went out to to their homes out there, or they rented homes. And one of these entrepreneurial person who owned a driving service have their drivers go into Manhattan, pick up mail, pick up the food that they want, pick up a variety of different items that can only be obtained in Manhattan and not out in the Hamptons, and transport them back to the Hamptons for hundreds upon hundreds of dollars. And they've just had gangbusters business. You
Right.
have to get creative. You have to figure out a way to service the wealthy in many ways, as best you can. My company, General Fining, we've somehow been able to stay open through this horrible time, especially in the hotspot of the New York area, because we are considered an essential company. Well, I think people should consider themselves to be all essential,
Mhm.
and view themselves as such. You have to be ready to take a chance, not jeopardize your health, but be on the ready as soon as you can get out of those houses to really figure out a way to service,
Yeah,
or
find
create
the
on your own.
population. And
Yeah,
I think that's what happened with the gold business. It was just a fluke of nature, because I owned a gym, and I was like, oh, I'm so burnt out, I'm going to give that up. And
yes,
then, you know, then my client was in the mortgage business, and she lost her job. And then
yeah,
so
yeah,
she was like, well, you want to try this gold business? I'm like, what's that? Right.
right.
So ultimately what happened was my
Mm,
business was built on the model of building relationships
yes,
and serving a population that historically was not treated very well, women in gold. I mean, that was just, and
well,
so that blew the lid off of it, you know,
yeah,
like what is fair value for gold? And honestly,
well,
I have my old reps are probably ready to good to go to get back in the
you
business,
know
you
what?
know?
Rev it up. I mean, absolutely. I think that is. I mean, you might want to do it on a smaller scale. I think that
Yeah.
back in 2010, there really was that was a time period where certainly the stock market collapsed to a point, but it was the real estate market that really just sent America into a downward spiral. So in order for people to pay their mortgages and pay their
Mhm.
bills, they had to liquidate gold, and they loved it. They loved, and you would know, Katie, you were at the parties, and you know
Yeah,
the
it was a
response that you got
blast.
there. People were just hugging you and kissing you because
Mhm.
you were helping them out in a tough time, and and most of the people back then were able to dance out of it. Now, for some positive news, the banking system in America is in a much better position than it was in 2009 and 10 to grapple with this type of crisis. See, they're not the ones who are being bailed out yet. It's the airlines, it's the transportation industry, it's the travel industry. Now, I
Hospitality,
don't think
right?
we're ever going to see cruise liners ever again.
I
I
don't
really
think so
think that
either.
I think the days of going on these cruises simply for health reasons alone are going to
Yes.
scare people. I mean, if they don't eliminate COVID-19 in the next, I don't even know, in the next year and a half, who's going to ever want to get in a boat again?
I know. And
Right?
my daughter was saying, with all the global warming, there are microbes that are getting released, like syphilis and like these weird strains of viruses and bacteria in melted glaciers. It's
Right.
like, oh,
I
right,
mean, look, we don't know what awaits us medically. So, I mean, you got to be careful and cautious. And I think the airline industry is another industry that is going to be pulverized because people will have a fear about getting on a small plane with, limited space and breathing in who knows what.
right,
So, that industry is certainly on the firing line. Do I recommend bailing everybody out? It's crazy. I've got some friends of mine. They're who had successful businesses 2 weeks ago. Now they're lining up for federal loans.
right.
So I don't know how it all plays out. I really
Mhm.
don't. I just know that right now we're in a wait and see game, and the people who are looking right now to see what the next turn to make is critical. These are
Right,
days you should be thinking about what markets to pursue,
right.
what
You know,
avenues to go down.
I have a question to ask you, and I think I would love to do part 2 of this because I want to talk about China, and I think we have a ton more to talk about. But I want to ask you
Yeah.
something more from the personal front. How
Mhm.
are you viewing this shift and change as a man? In your family, what
Mhm.
is this bringing up for you on an emotional level as a man during this time?
Well, that's a great question, Katie. The opportunity that we had when we were in New York about 3 weeks ago, I had made the decision. My wife was in Australia. That I decided that it would be best if we got out of the New York area. I realized I could work from anywhere I could, as long as I had a phone hook up to my office, which I do. I chose the state of South Carolina because I wanted to get a little bit better weather. We're by a beach here, and it's a really idyllic situation for me. But it's really, in many ways, it's been one of the most fulfilling 2 weeks of my life, because I really have an opportunity to spend real quality time with my family, and certainly not just getting to know my family. I knew my family, but I have an opportunity to really just be around. And my wife always had a, um, a not a fear, but she always wanted me out of the house on a daily basis. And I'm sure she would like me out of the house sometimes too. But she's okay right now with me actually operating here. So maybe she'll grant me when this returns to normal, a day or two, where we live.
So do you
To
feel
work out.
like the crisis has shifted the way you're showing up, or do you feel like it's just reprioritizing, or what do you think on that?
No, I'm doing dishes. I never did dishes where I live. I'm doing things around the house that I never would consider. Not because I things that as a man I probably wouldn't have found myself doing out of where we live.
Mhm.
But now I feel I need to pitch in more in certain ways that I wasn't doing prior. So yeah, I think there's a lot of things that can be learned, and certainly that as we go on in the days, it's been a pretty good ride so far.
Mhm.
6 months will get back to me. We'll see, but definitely,
I will.
yeah, no doubt. But I mean, I think it's certainly it's definitely the most interesting period in our lives. I got to tell you, I've stopped watching the daily news, the daily briefings from the White House or New York or whatever. I just don't find that to be therapeutic at this point and
Mhm.
be informative. I just don't find that the news is more about the tragedies, the numbers, and how to wear a mask. One day we're told to wear a mask, the next day don't wear a mask, and we don't know truly what the medical realities of this are. And better yet,
Right.
we don't know the long-term effects of it.
Well,
So
and
we,
also too, I think that this brings up the point that we first talked about, was that, so much of people are focused on the fear of the virus, that
mhm,
the fear of the loss of the economy, and,
mm,
and like, just people are still in the phase of like, just tell me everything's going to go okay. Just
yeah,
tell me that by Easter,
right,
everything's going to be okay. And we have politicians still playing into that, like someone is going to take care of us. And the bottom line is, this is ground zero. Like, this is time for us to take care of ourselves and other people
Yes.
that we love, and come up with a strategy of how you're going to reinvent yourself if need be.
That's exactly right. But the thing is, without a deadline or without a fixed date, and we all like to look, whether you're in jail serving 6 months or, that's why when you go to a doctor and they tell you how you have cancer, well, you got 6 months, you got, 5 years. Everybody wants to have a finite deadline. And
Right.
this one is the one thing that nobody knows.
Yeah, no certainty
only
whatsoever.
A baseball game can go on forever, It can go, theoretically. So can this, though. That's the sad part about it. We don't know.
Right. Yeah, just another inning, and let's see how many
Yeah.
innings this goes. Yeah. So is there anything that last minute that you want to share? Because I want to be respectful of your time, and we are absolutely doing number 2, because I have a whole series of questions we didn't even get to.
Okay. No, not just, whoever's out there and interested, certainly, the one parting advice I can give you, if you have anything disposable income to do this, go to gold. I really find that is the one investment advice, other than taking care of yourself. If you're watching what's going on out there and you see the marketplace, gold is absolutely something that you should be very concerned with investing. You should be not concerned with it. You should be absolutely on board with investing. And I wish, you guys take my advice on that.
Yeah. Awesome. David
Okay.
Greenfield, thank you so much. I appreciate
All right,
you.
Katie.
And
Thank
thank you
you.
so much for joining me. And
All right,
viewers,
thanks
thank
for
you so
having
much for tuning in. I'm definitely going to be interviewing David again, because he is such a wealth of information. And
Thank you.
I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thank you so much, and take
Thanks,
good
Katie.
care.
Thank you. You too. Thank you.